gifted few that understand that there's a story behind the story. Thanks for joining me. My name is Dave Milner. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy, and this week I'm going to take the biggest risk that I have ever taken in one of my shows. All right, and I want you guys to hang on with me, even though you might think that you want to click off because you've heard this story before. You haven't, trust me. All right, now, before I begin, I want to thank Mary Smelser on the Twitter for some kind comments she made about the show. I encourage everyone to contact me with questions, comments, or whatnot at UBG Contact on the Twitter. That's UBG Contact on the Twitter. That's also where I'm going to post links to articles and such that pertain to the stories that I do. All right. Now, first thing we're going to talk about is a story that everyone is tired of, but I cover it from a different angle. And, I have stayed away from things like the Zimmerman trial and other such stories because everyone's been over them, and we're all sick of it. Usually I stay away from the things that everybody else is doing, but I decided to look a little bit deeper into one that everyone's been talking about for at least the past week and put it in a perspective that a lot of people may not be thinking about, but that they should. There's a reason why people who don't live in the area affected by this story should give a damn, and I'm going to give you that reason. All right, enough preamble. The story I'm going to talk about, or the individual I'm going to talk about, is Anthony Weiner. That's right, the guy who's running for mayor of New York City. Now, I'm not saying that Christine Quinn would be any better than Anthony Weiner as mayor of New York City. Certainly, she holds many of the same views and might even be worse. Who the heck knows? Now, everyone has been concentrating on the whole sexting scandal and all this other jazz. But I thought about this, and I thought about the further implications of the man himself being in the position of mayor of New York, and just how powerful a position that really is. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, according to Anthony Weiner's own bio from Politico, which I've got to say, I really wish they had posted a soundtrack with this, complete with violins, because that's what it reads like. I'll post this, of course. But according to this bio, Anthony Weiner has never held a job outside of politics, going to work for the then Representative Chuck Schumer soon after he graduated from college in 1985. And if there's anyone from New York listening, you've, I'm sure, seen the commercials from Mr. Weiner talking about how much he loves New York and about how much he cares about New York. Apparently, Mr. Weiner loves New York so much that he actually went to SUNY in Pittsburgh. Now, after he got out in 1985, he went to work for the then Representative Chuck Schumer, and then went on to serve as the youngest member of the New York City Council. Then, in 1998, he ran for the representative position that Chuck Schumer held after Chuck Schumer went for the senatorial office held by the then Senator D'Amato. And I have to say, that's something that I hadn't read, a name that I hadn't read in a long time. But that's who Chuck Schumer replaced. Now, I want to go through, as I said, just how powerful a position this man who has never held any kind of a job outside of politics could possibly hold. And I've been thinking about this, so I decided to dig around and stay away from places like Wikipedia and all that junk, and go to some other sources. And I found some very interesting figures, and that's the reason why this show is called Figures. Now, of course, if anybody wants to ascribe that also to Mr. Weiner's extracurricular activities, they can. But we're going to talk a little bit about just the wide of scope of power that this petulant, grown-up 5-year-old is going to be able to wield once he becomes mayor of New York City. Now, New York City's total area is 301 square miles. Now, that's larger than D.C., and those of you who know anything about politics know that people in the District of Columbia have been agitating to become a state for a long time. It's actually smaller than the land area of Rhode Island, which is the smallest state, but it's in between that and the District of Columbia. One state and one that would very much like to be a state. New York City could actually be its own state if it wanted to be. In fact, it could be its own country if it wanted to be, but I decided not to search on stats comparing New York to other countries because I wanted to keep it within the borders of the United States of America. Now, according to the 2010 census, New York City's population is approximately 8,224,910. Now, that is more of a population than the entire state of Virginia, which has a population of just over 8 million. So that's how many people Anthony Weiner would potentially have sway over were he to become mayor of New York. Now, the estimated number of New York City employees, according to something called Quora.com, is 250,000. Now, this varies quite a bit, but it's right around that. That's 250,000 sports fans. Now, to put that in perspective, that's bigger than the entire population of St. Petersburg, Florida, as of 2011, which was 244,683, or about half the population of the state of Wyoming at 493,782. Now, one of the things that a person gets when they run for office is the ability to spend money. And we know how leftists love to spend money. And Mr. Weiner is definitely an arch leftist. The current New York City budget is $70 billion. Now, that's more than the total spending of the state of Tennessee, which is $58.7 billion. All right, according to nyc.gov, the New York City Police Department's current uniform strength is approximately 34,500. Now, that's about the size of a U.S. Army Corps. And a U.S. Army Corps goes anywhere from 20,000 to 45,000 soldiers. That's 2 to 5 divisions, and that's typically commanded by a lieutenant general. That's 3 stars, boys and girls. That's a very, very large military force. It's a virtual army. So, what do we have here in conclusion? The amount of power that Anthony Weiner could possibly wield is enormous. He'll be able to wield more than the budget of many states as far as money. He'll have sway over more people than live in some countries, certainly more people than live in many United States, and he will have a virtual army of police officers to carry out his will. And we have to look at this with the backdrop of the kind of individual that Anthony Weiner is. There have been stories about how he has no friends in the Congress and that sort of thing. And he really has no reason to have any friends in Congress because it's all been laid out for him as far as his pathway to power. Something that people don't often think about, but that's absolutely true, is political parties, in this case both the Democratic and Republican parties, keep a stable of potential presidential candidates available and ready to go just in case. I mean, you never know, for instance, when a meteor might hit Hillary Clinton. And this would, of course, be a tragedy because we really do want to be able to study more about space, and the loss of a giant space rock would be a terrible thing. But these candidates are preloaded and ready to go. With just a little bit of PR spin, they can be put in front-runner positions for President of the United States. And that's why you, if you don't live in New York, should give a damn about whether or not Anthony Weiner gets his little texting fingers on the kind of power that I just talked about. He could potentially, yes, be President of the United States, as ridiculous as that sounds. If you look through the list of presidents of the United States, which I did, you'll find that many of them were governors of New York State. Now, that's not New York City, but it's very close. And at least one president had a rather prominent job in New York City. And I'm talking about Chester A. Arthur. Now, I'm going to include a bio of President Arthur in with my upload to UBG Contact. And if you read that, you're going to find very interesting similarities. Both Arthur and Weiner have been the recipients of some very nice political patronage over the years, and that can lead to a lot of power. In the case of Chester Arthur, it led to the office of President of the United States. And there are other aspects to this too. Those who have watched Fox News in the past know that Anthony Weiner was for a long time the leftist attack dog who used to appear on their shows. He's been described in many ways, none of them complimentary, and his behavior to me mostly comes off, as I said, being that of a petulant 5-year-old with power. Imagine that old Twilight Zone episode where Bill Mooney plays the kid who can send people he doesn't like to the cornfield. Now, some of my compatriots are going to laugh a little bit about that because that references something else. That's fine, but for those who don't know about that, let's just say that this is a kind of thing, this is the kind of person that we do not want as President of the United States. And there's the other aspect of Anthony Weiner that really hasn't been examined that closely. It's been examined a bit, but it really hasn't been touched on that much, and that is Huma Abedin, his wife. Now, Sergeant Tim Sumner tweeted me and said that Ms. Abedin worked for a Muslim Brotherhood journal founded by an Al-Qaeda financier. Now, I trust Sergeant Tim. He runs Freedom Radio, which is on Wednesdays on Blog Talk Radio, and I encourage everyone to listen to this. The Muslim Brotherhood connection to Anthony Weiner is very worrying because his background looks as if he is a typical political soldier. As long as he gets what he wants, he'll do what he's told. And in this instance, he's got a direct, extremely intimate connection to the Muslim Brotherhood. Still don't give a damn about Anthony Weiner? Well, I hope you are giving a little bit more of a damn about Anthony Weiner now. Because as you can see, he's the sort of person that is exactly right for manipulation by party leaders, and in this case, by the Muslim Brotherhood. We seem to have a problem in our country at this point with electing people who are fronted by these political parties and controlled by them. They're groomed from college years on up, and they're shaped, and they're manipulated so that they really have no choice when they get into these big positions of power but to do exactly and precisely what they are told. So is it any wonder, in a sense, that Anthony Weiner has done the things that he has? It's almost understandable for someone who is essentially the puppet of party leaders, and in this case, rather creepily, the Muslim Brotherhood. All right, now I want to get to my Awesome American for this week. It's going to be kind of a short show, but I think that it was an important thing to do to point out these facts about Anthony Weiner outside of the jokes. But the guy I'm going to talk about now was anything but a joke. And I'm going to post a couple of articles about him, including one with video, at UBG Contact. And I didn't want for this man to pass without giving him recognition. Now, I'm talking about Larry Grathwohl. Now, he was the only person to infiltrate the Weather Underground for the FBI. Now, he passed away recently, and I'm going to read this short article about him. He was in his late 60s, and his cause of death has not been released, but people close to him suspect natural causes. Grathwohl was a friend to many conservative political movements, including the writer of the article, who is Brandon Darby. Left-of-center political groups generally shunned him for helping law enforcement stop the violence and terrorist acts of the Weather Underground. A group of Hollywood and liberals have granted deity status in recent years to those terrorists. He returned from Vietnam and worked on a loading dock in Cincinnati when he encountered two Weathermen members handing out flyers for a protest that would turn out to be the now infamous Chicago Days of Rage. Grathwohl went to a former police officer he knew and expressed his concerns over potential violence against law enforcement officers. Shortly afterwards, he was recruited by the FBI. He ultimately infiltrated the Weathermen movement and continued to serve in an undercover capacity when the group later became the Weather Underground. Grathwohl helped prevent numerous bombings, including an intended series of attacks in Detroit, allegedly masterminded by Bill Ayers. Grathwohl has been a hero and big brother to many who have served in an undercover capacity in the FBI's Human Source program, often calling to chat and make sure the dangers associated with the service were not having a negative effect on our lives and our relationships to people we loved. Tim Trent, a close friend of Grathwohl's, released this statement. Larry made the type of sacrifice most people can't understand. He was a very young man and a young father, and he had just gotten back from Vietnam, and he signed up again to protect America from idiot Marxist terrorists like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn, who were trying to murder policemen and soldiers. The thing about Larry that I loved the most was how he wanted to protect people. Here he was undercover in this violent communist cult, and the Weathermen were trying to get the women to give up their children to foster care so they could, quote, commit themselves to revolution, unquote. Larry wanted to save them. He wanted to save Diane Ogden, and he could not. He was almost a decade younger than the Weathermen leaders, but he was a man, and they were psychotic children. Trent also noted that Grathwohl was about a decade younger than the leadership of the Weathermen and lacked the advanced degrees that many of them held. Still, he managed to infiltrate and recognize the threat that they pose to the nation. Many of the predictions and fears from his writings have come to pass, and today the former leaders of the Weathermen enjoy positions of high authority in society. Those of us who have served in an undercover capacity with the FBI have lost a tremendous friend and a valuable resource. Thankfully, Grathwohl's 1976 book, Bringing Down America, an FBI informer with the Weathermen, was recently re-released and is available for purchase. All right, now, When I talk about awesome Americans people, I'm talking about people who sacrifice and give of themselves. And Grathwohl certainly put himself in no small amount of danger with these people. These were murderous thugs disguised as Marxists who supposedly cared about the people. They cared so much about the people, by the way, that they were ready to, quote-unquote, eliminate thousands of American citizens who wouldn't buy into their crap. That's how much they cared about the people. But there was one man who really cared about the people, who went into the lion's den and survived and stopped them. Now, sadly, people like Bill Ayers and many of the other weathermen do enjoy this enhanced status in our society. But as long as we remember, Mr. Grathwohl, that enhanced status is going to be smeared, and always should be. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. This is going to be kind of a short show, but hey, that's okay. Please contact me at UBGContact on Twitter if you have any questions, comments, or anything of that nature, and I will try and get back to you if I can. Thank you, and may your God go with you. Goodbye.